here tonight. The two people that we have joining us tonight are from the Mass Environmental Protection Agency. Mr. Stephen Davies, who's here immediately to my right, and then Jolene Dubner. Is that correct? That is also here. And what I'd like to do is first introduce myself. I'm Jim Giefried. I'm one of the members of the Norfolk Citizens Advisory Committee. I'm going to be moderating the meeting tonight. Since Norfolk had called the meeting, what we would like to do in the process of running the meeting is the following. In the first portion of the meeting, what we would like is that the Norfolk committees, we have various committees who specifically have been investigating specific questions to ask tonight, be allowed to ask their questions. After a period of time, then it will be turned open to the rest of the audience that's here. Then after a period of time, it will be opened up again to everyone that's here tonight. So it'll be roughly about an hour process. I will step in at times if need be to help clarify or interject comments or to try to help move the process along. There may be a little bit of a problem with the microphone because it doesn't reach far enough. So you may see us bouncing up and down or trying to pass it over. Bear with us in regards to that. If I can't hear you talking in the back, I will repeat your question. Or I may ask you to come up front to address your question. Please stand up when you do ask your questions. All right, I thank you very much. What I'd like to do first is to allow the people from MEPA first to explain what is the role of MEPA in this process of following up the MWRA's reports. So, David.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out. My name is Steve Davis. I'm Assistant Secretary of Environmental Affairs, and I direct the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, not Protection Agency, for the Commonwealth. The Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, which is the responsibility of the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, for whom I work, is the state's overview environmental ordinance. It is a statute that sets a simple burden and duty for state agencies, and that burden is that when state agencies act, they will take all feasible measures to avoid or minimize damage to the environment. It doesn't say that they won't act, because they must, but that when they do act, they must act in a reasonably wise way, and they must take steps to limit damage to the environment. The process that we use to assure that is called the MEPA review. And when a state agency proposes to act, whether it's on a permit for a private project, or in this case, the MWRA is itself a state agency and their entire action is subject to MEPA, they undergo a review process that begins with the filing of an environmental notification form. That document is reviewed by all and sundry, and a document called a scope issues. And that scope controls the review of the project. It specifies those areas that will be considered and the things that must be done to document the project, its environmental effects, and most importantly, what are called the mitigation measures, the things that will limit impact. Those can be broad and in many cases will be. When a document is under review, our function is as the rule keeper and the lead review agency. We do not work for the MWRA. We do not work for the Department of Environmental Quality Engineering. We do not work for anyone but the Secretary of Environmental Affairs. We are his staff for these reviews. That is a truly unique organization nationally. Most states follow the federal model where agencies review their own actions. That is not so in the Commonwealth. We, with you and with other interested agencies and citizens groups, review over 600 projects a year throughout the Commonwealth. This is one of those projects, and to you, obviously, the most important. To us, it is an important project and one which we have invested a great deal of time in designing a special review procedure. When a project is extremely large and extremely complicated, as virtually everything the MWRA does is, we take an approach which is called a major and complicated designation and a major and complicated project review. Basically, that means that we design a special procedure and we review the project many more times than we normally would. In a normal process, we will have the environmental notification form filing. We will develop the scope, and we will review just twice more, a draft EIR, environmental impact report, and a final EIR. In this case, we have 5 reviews now so far of various stages of materials, which Jolene will go over with you in a little more detail in a couple of minutes. And we are in the last but one review. We are in the draft EIR stage of the review now. Our purpose this evening is to hear your comments and to hear your concerns. We are not going to defend the technical content of the documents. We did not prepare them. We, like you, are reviewing them. We are also very interested in what you have to say about those documents. They will color and shape our review. Technical points that you raise in that review must be responded to by the MWRA, so that if you can raise for us the right questions, we can see that they are answered. In addition, if you have what I would call process questions, questions of how things have gotten to this stage at this time, how things will proceed from here on out, schedules, challenge rights. I spend a lot of time teaching people how to sue MEPA, and the likes. We'll be happy to respond to them. Again, I thank you for being here. We will try to be as direct with you as we can, and we are here to listen. I'd like Jolene to spend a few moments telling you about the special procedure for this review. Thank you.
I don't know how loud this is. Can you all hear? Steve was mentioning that MEPA is the state's overbody review agency. And we are taking a look, thank you, at the MWRA's proposals for cleaning up Boston Harbor. This project, the Residuals Management Facilities Plan, is one of a number of projects. Separate review is ongoing for example, the treatment plant itself and the outfall from the treatment plant. This project that we're looking at, the Residuals Project, basically takes a look at what do we do with what is left over after the wastewater is treated. The sludge is one of the things that's left over, as is what is called grit and screenings and scum. It's residuals. It's what's left over. This process is a major and complicated project. As Steve mentioned, it is not one for which a traditional MEPA review is taking place. Again, a traditional MEPA review would have a draft impact report followed up by a final impact report to answer questions which were raised in the draft. This project had a special procedure established because there were so many components to the project. And we are actually nearing the end of the MEPA review of the project. And just to give you a little overview of the reviews that have come to pass in front of MEPA to date, there were a series of documents that were reviewed, I believe, about a year ago, reviewed individually, which took a look at the characterization of residuals, the different technologies that are available to treat the residuals and process the residuals, the different methods of transportation available to move these residuals from places of, from the wastewater treatment plant to wherever they're going to be treated, to wherever they might be ultimately reused or disposed of. These 3 documents have been in front of MEPA and have gone for public review in the traditional MEPA fashion of a 30-day public review and comment period. The outcome of these 3 documents eventually would be to merge the characterization of residuals, the transportation, and the methods, the technologies, into a single document, you might say, that would encompass all of the ranges of technology, transportation, as well as the sites that might be chosen to locate the facilities on which to treat the residuals. etc. So as you see, it is a complicated process, which we've tried to break down into its pieces so that at the end of the process, when appropriate technologies, transportation modes, etc., have been identified, they can then be merged to look at a comprehensive package of options. That's where we are now. We are looking at what are the alternative ways, the alternative sites, the alternative methods that can be used in the residuals management. We have come through the series of reviews where we've reviewed individually the technologies, transportation, etc., and taken a look at some site screening analysis, and we're down to a limited number of sites and a limited number of technologies. The MWRA has recently filed what you could say the shakeout of all of the previous reviews in their draft environmental impact report. That's taken all of the previous analysis and sifted it into what they believe are logical alternatives. And they have submitted 5 options which are under review right now. For your information, the review period for the draft EIR is a 60-day review period. We're welcoming public comments. We've gotten a lot of comments to date from both Walpole and Norfolk on the documents that have been in front of us. And that review period will expire on I believe the 28th of April. This part of the process will really take on a more traditional MEPA approach, and that is we look at basically what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What are the range of alternatives? What is the necessary mitigation? And that's really one of the things that MEPA is all about. What is the proposed project? What are the problems with the project? And what needs to be done to make the project work? And is it feasible? And that's the stage that we're in right now. They've taken all of the different alternatives that have been identified, sifted them down. There are 5 that are on the table. As you know, the Board of Directors of the MWRA, who I do not speak for, has come forward with some preferred alternatives and have put them on the table in the draft environmental impact report, which we are reviewing right now, again expiring on the 28th of April. And what we are doing is reviewing those documents for completeness, for technicalities, for methodologies, to see what makes sense, to see what doesn't make sense, to see what needs further investigation. And this is one of the stages where we do rely very heavily on the reviewers, the folks from the towns where the projects are proposed to be located, because these are projects, whether it's a residuals landfill or it's a shopping center that MEPA might have under review or a housing project, these are projects that may be in your town, and you know the ins and outs of your town sometimes better than we do. So we do hope to hear from you, and that's one of the reasons I'm sure you all came out tonight. So the draft EIR is under review now. The next stage for the MWRA will be to answer questions that arise as a result of the draft in the final EIR. And that will be their obligations, if you will, under MEPA. Steve mentioned that around September is when we would be expecting the MWRA to file their final EIR. So that's sort of where the project is in our process. It's somewhat confusing. It sometimes confuses me because, again, it's not a typical straightforward MEPA review. There have been a number of documents. There have been a number of pieces, a number of elements to the process, and even for those of us who are working with it all the time, we sometimes have to say, now where are we in the process? We're in the draft EIR phase. We're sort of nearing the end of the MEPA portion of the project, but there's still plenty of time for review, plenty of time for comment, plenty of time to really get involved and understand exactly what it is that's being proposed.
Thank you. So you can see the importance of the meeting tonight is really to assure that we bring forth the many facts and many discrepancies that we have found in our readings and looking at some of the material that the MWRA has put forth. So with no further ado, what I'd like to do is again start with the agenda that we talked about initially. The Norfolk Citizens Advisory Committee groups will begin the discussion. After approximately an hour, it will then be turned over to the rest of the audience for about approximately an hour, and then back to the general audience as a whole. If I may take the first question. Alex, yes. Can you stand up, please?
Sure. From the town of Norfolk, which derives all its water from wells and is not in the MWRA district, what do you look at from an environmental standpoint on the other side of the Stop River or into the Norfolk area where there's no other way to deliver water should our water become contaminated by the leakage of the proposed landfill? MWRA tells us that they cannot guarantee the reliability of the landfill. I guess the manufacturer only guarantees that liner for 4 years in a warranty situation, but they cannot guarantee, the construction or et cetera, et cetera. So what do you look at to protect our water, being that we have no other way to deliver the water to the residents of the town, being that it's strictly well-derived water?
In general, in dealing with a water supply question, there are several things that we're interested in. First of all is the design of the landfill itself. Even though the DPE or hypalon liner itself cannot be guaranteed for more than 4 years, the liner system that's being proposed is one which does have a good track record in the Commonwealth. It's a double liner system with a synthetic liner on top separated by a sand layer or sand and light gravel layer from a clay liner. Natural clay as you would find in the ground, which is a very low permeability material. That too is underlain by a separate gravel layer, and both have what is called a leachate recovery system in them. It's a belt and suspenders approach. The hypalon liner has below it gravel that has perforated tubes in it to collect any leachate that gets through the hypalon. Then there is a clay liner, and beneath that is another set of perforated tubes to collect any leachate that gets through that. Those systems are routinely used and are quite effective. That's not, though, the full extent of our concern. The second is the local area concern, the so-called Zone 2 question, with water supply wells that might be located near to a landfill. In this case, the wells at the prison and near the prison grounds. Those investigations have been reported upon here, and we don't yet know how accurate that reporting is. It's in front of us as it is in front of you. But we're certainly concerned with that. Further afield, the concern goes down as both the distance from the site rises, and especially if the wells are in a different aquifer or very far removed. The concern grows lesser as you grow further away. But our primary focus is on trying to make sure that the MWRA designs and ultimately constructs a landfill that is as leak-proof as is possible, and that it has leak capturing mechanisms should it leak, and that it's not located in Zone 2 of any active supply well.
Okay, this hospital that we sit in is several hundred feet from the site, right across the street, derives strictly well water. The director of this hospital, I don't know if he's here tonight, has a grave concern.
It's hard for the people in the back. Can you hear Alex talk? No, I didn't think so.
Yeah, the question I've got is that, we hear what you're saying about monitoring the leachate and the test monitoring wells that you'll have around it, and the fact that there's going to be a cell of 4 or 5 acres active at any one time. But there doesn't seem to be any contingency plan if, and the MWR is telling us that this thing, probably will leak when they tell us that they cannot guarantee the reliability. Whether it's 5 years down the line, 20 years down the line, 50 years down the line. And, we hear about the monitoring, but what happens if it does leak and gets into the water supply? The thing that's got the citizens of Norfolk enraged is that there's no other way to deliver water to the residents except via well. And that, it just, we hear what you're saying about monitoring, but we don't hear anything that's a contingency plan. Monitoring is not a contingency plan.
One of the things that might well be suggested, and I don't yet know if it has been suggested, is such contingency planning. But first,